Well, welcome everybody. I'm Beverly Carter, and I am very happy to discuss real estate today with our top REMAX realtor, Jane Johnston. And a little bit about me. I was commissioned just over 7 years ago as a notary, and actually met Jane very shortly after that. I have a master's in applied legal studies, and I have a lot of experience that I bring into the role that I have as a notary public. It's a lot of problem solving in my day-to-day life, and lots of paperwork too, as you can imagine. And so I use everything that I've done before. I say I have 3 PhDs in life, and it matters on a day-to-day basis. And we love dogs here. I love my poodle. A couple housekeeping items. If you would like to participate, please do go into the chat session and post some questions. It may be something that we're going to touch on. There will be a Q&A at the end, so we can open that up for everybody to participate as well. And if you find this valuable, please share it with your friends and family on Facebook. As well, we will be posting on our YouTube channel this Zoom and Learn afterwards, so stay tuned. So our upcoming session is actually tomorrow. It's Pets in Your Will. And I did that last week. It was very successful, so I'm making it available again for others. So things to consider. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about realtor relationships with, of course, me as a notary, as a legal professional, as well as other people in that I say are industry colleagues. We're going to look at how to set up our real estate for success, whether it's a sale, a purchase, or a sale and a purchase. And I'll sort of incorporate a bit of mortgage renewal into that, because there are elements of a purchase. If you're getting a mortgage, there are things that you need to know and do. We'll be looking at general real estate trends, current, overall, future, any comparables last month to this month, or anything that Jane should know. And we'll be looking at COVID-19 impacts of how our industry has changed, things that practical aspects of that around signings. For example, banks have reduced hours, and that's caused some challenges at times. We'll talk about the importance of a realtor in this whole process. And we'll look at the process beginning to end and give different tips and tricks about why different things matter, what you should be considering, and look at any COVID unique clauses or other concerns that people may have around, showing a house, things like that. We'll be looking at timing, also lenders' requirements, because there's some unique changes in the legal world. I imagine also in the real estate world overall. I've heard it said that we've advanced 8 years in 8 weeks. So there you go. So this is a bit about Jane, but I just would like to talk more about Jane from my own personal perspective. As I mentioned a short while ago, that I met Jane at a lunch just about 7 years ago. I was very fortunate to sit beside her. At that time, I think it was just prior to her becoming the executive director for eWomen, of which we both belong. And I've come to know Jane very well over these years. And it's been a very lovely friendship. And I've come to really appreciate her as a realtor, certainly the professionalism, her integrity, and the different attributes that I see about Jane are incredibly hardworking, very caring, inventive. The way in which Jane, you've pivoted, certainly during COVID, but even before that, you really are a leader in the game. You're award-winning. I couldn't even name all the awards that I've seen you win, but often a top realtor of the month, of the year, of Western Canada, and things like that. You are a former teacher, and I think that is something that we share, that I know that impacts how you connect with people, because you can see people from different angles and really connect with them in that way. And you, I believe, arrived in Victoria for love. Am I correct? Or you found love when you arrived here? There's two kids that resulted in it, whatever. So, so tell me a bit about you, the person, Jane. I know you're an incredibly strong family person, a lot of energy, always on the go doing something. So give us a bit about you as a person.
Well, I'm just reading the introduction, and it's true. I came from a very tight-knit community in Toronto. Briar Hill is a street in North Toronto, which is, it used to be called Uptown, now it's called Midtown. That's how much Toronto's grown.
Oh, yeah. I used to live in that area, so I know that area very well. Yeah.
So my mom was a politician in Toronto, so I spent my life knocking on doors and meeting our neighbors. I've worked in a lot of the local stores selling to the community, and somebody said to me once, you know everybody who walks through the door. And yeah, because I grew up having to know everybody, and that's just the way it worked. But anyway, so I got into real estate just because I felt like I could do it better than the realtor who I was being served by. And my first year in real estate, I think I sold 24 homes, which is considered a lot at that time. And ever since then, I've just been going gangbusters. I really took to it like a duck to water. I like working with people. I find the teaching component comes in, that I'm able to help people through a process, and we look at their objectives, and we work together to achieve them with a team of people like you. And and what I've done is over the years is honed the process so that as things have worked or not worked, they've either been tossed or added in. So I'm always looking for new ideas, but we're very systems process oriented. So if there's a problem with the way things are happening, we change the system, and that's how we keep on top of things, actually. So,
yeah, it's that I absolutely relate to, is all the systems and processes, right? And I mean, in talking about real estate and finding success, is really understanding that you do have a process to go through to get all your checks and balances done, because there's some very strong time considerations and whatnot. Let's get into that in a bit, but just tell me a bit about what's going on these days. What's your general overview of the, I know what mine is, but what's your overview on July and real estate in Greater Victoria? Right. Yeah. I'm not quite there, but give me the end of the month and I'll get there too. So
I imagine you're 2 or 3 weeks behind me, right?
Yeah. That's right.
So, because it goes from the realtor to the person who's conveying the property. But yes, so last night I was working probably till 10:30, and finally I was just like, oh gosh, I just need to go to bed. We're submitting an offer, right? We've already just submitted an offer tonight. We're submitting an offer on another property.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, I did one on Friday, working with buyers. People now suddenly want to see a lot of properties. And I sent a notice out to all my clients that I really feel that sorry, somebody's texting me. I really felt that the market will be strong over the summer, because we're coming out of a good period where we're COVID free and people are adhering to good protocol and practice, and they're being respectful. And Dr. Henry was saying that she thinks that we're going to have a second wave, and everybody I know in the medical industry agrees. So I'm like, okay, well, if we don't have a second wave, that's good, but we can only plan around what we know right now. And what we know right now is that people are willing to let buyers into their homes. If we follow the protocol, which is we mask up, we wear the gloves, we sanitize our hands, and then we have to report just that we've been healthy and our clients are healthy every time we show a property. So yeah, like it's just crazy, multiple offers all of a sudden. It's like a ball bounced and it went from like here to here really fast.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I could tell in June when prior to that there was no ads anywhere, and then all of a sudden there's like ads popping up, particularly on Facebook, and you're like, oh, okay. So when you say 2 to 3 weeks behind, you're right, because in your 2 to 3 weeks, that's generally what it takes to you know see the house, show an interest in it, put an offer in it, get it accepted to be conditional, and then do your due diligence for all the different, whether you're doing an inspection, getting financial approval and all of that, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I'd heard was, and this was this is probably about 5 or 6 weeks ago, that getting somebody in to do photos or getting somebody to do an inspection was very difficult. Like there was, from the time that you found somebody, they were 2 to 3 weeks out before they'd be able to come and see your house. They were just that booked up. How are you finding that now?
Well, let's just say it's one reason why you have really good relationships with people in the field.
Thank you. You're
Wait,
going to help me pivot. Other parts about, realtor are the ability to really understand the market, to be responsive, to be available. The relationships that you have with the different people. It's going to make if you're listing a property and then you've got a potential buyer saying, oh, we found a bit of a plumbing issue, you've got all of these people on speed dial. And because you are, you really produce well, you do high volume of real estate in a general year, they're going to always respond to your calls, right? And that matters because you want to get these things fixed so that it's not a negotiating tactic to say, we're going to reduce this by $5,000. Well, it's just a leaky faucet, right? So ideally, those are all assessed, up front, but you can't determine absolutely everything, right? At that point. So.
Right. So, I mean, the thing that people underestimate is the relationship between the realtor, first of all, and the mortgage broker.
Yeah.
So I like to have a really strong relationship with the mortgage broker because then I can coordinate the offer better.
Yes. Yeah.
So for instance, I'm working on an offer and I'm asking the buyer, when can the deposit come in? Because the sooner the deposit comes in after the offer, the more attractive the offer is in a multiple offer situation.
Right. Okay.
And then, and the buyer doesn't understand the nuances of what I'm asking and
right.
what the broker is saying. So that's number one. And then even though we haven't got the offer, I've asked the inspector, I'm giving away all my secrets.
Yeah.
I've already asked the inspector for Friday,
mm-hmm.
Because I know he's free, if he can just reserve the time, and I'll know tonight if I'm going to get the offer. And if we do, then we have an inspection booked. And if we don't, then then he'll go on to the next person. So he's busy enough that he'll do that for me. And I hired him enough that he was fine with me doing that.
Right. Well, you're reliable. You're not going to do that just to waste time, right? And if somebody else does try to do that as a part of their process, and they don't follow through, or they're not respectful of that other person's time, that's not going to fly, right? Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I know, in my mind, I'll often get calls, from my perspective, the legal, because there's different conditions that will go into it, and one of them is searching the title, which is really, it's going into the land title registry and pulling all the information about that title on. And so I'll often get called upon to review charges that are there, look at legal notations and things like that. A lot of them are quite straightforward. But not always. Real estate is, another reason the importance of using a realtor is that the stakes are high. And I think, one of the things that I find is that most people forget that this is one of the biggest contracts that they ever sign in their life, right? It's one of the biggest dollar value items that they'll ever purchase. And so not only is there the contract for the purchase, but there's also the contract for the mortgage. So there's actually two that a lot of people don't realize. And so your relationship with the mortgage specialist is really important, because I find that from my perspective, so where I fit in the perspective is usually, you know, at the beginning, you've got the client, you go out, you find the house on a purchase, right? And then, you know, I may come in to do a title review or to answer some legal questions. And then everybody does their work, they get the inspections, they make sure their finances in order. Another part of that is making sure that you've got insurance in place. And then I come in once the conditions all come off. Once you've confirmed the lenders are okay to give you money, all of these different things, and the house looks good.
Issues with the house that come up.
Yeah.
So, for instance, sometimes there's things like unregistered easements or
Yes.
rights of way, like or like sewers going through the middle of the backyard.
Right.
You just happen to fall upon or into.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just a little bit of navigating before it gets to you. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a huge reason to use a realtor. And how, you know, finding out about those things is no small task in some cases. You really have to know what you're looking for. It might be just something that somebody said that twigs you to that. It might be investigating at the municipal office, talking to the neighbors, right? Like there's, you know, you don't always know. And in some cases, I mean, a good selling, you know, a listing agent will assess all of those things out, because they do come up. And where I come in is that if that comes up after the fact, that can be a big deal, right? It can be a deal breaker, even though there's a signed contract. So, you know, when we take on any conveyance work, it's not just routine work. I'm going to say probably 1 in 15 files, some weird thing comes up, right? And that's high enough frequency to, like, I never know. I say to clients, I said, you know, today everything looks normal. Everything looks like it's going to go ahead. I said, but I have seen enough in my life to say never. And I said, you know, it can be random things. You know, somebody dies, right? You know, like just weird stuff. This year, COVID was a pretty good example of how random things come up. Glitches in systems, you know, and it's not my fault. It's not the client's fault. It's not the realtor's fault. It's not the sellers or the buyers. It's nobody's fault. They're just really weird things that happen. And I'm sure you're seeing a lot of that before it even ever gets to me, right? So you've sussed out a lot of those sorts of things. But there's, you know, unique, you know, if you're testing a well, you know, weird, you know, does it actually have all the water that they say that it is? Is it really an artesian well, right? So no.
Well, yesterday I spoke with some sellers who they've shared a driveway for a long time, 20 years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you have an unregistered
right
of way.
Yeah.
And the son was being tough, and he said, well, you know, I don't care. Right. I don't care if the neighbor has been accessing our driveway. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
And I said, well, he built a big garage there, and what if he sues you for damages because now he can no longer access his garage?
Right.
Like your parents gave him permission, so you need to respect that. So anyway, those sorts of things, just helping people navigate, and also helping them stop making, stop covering things up and stop making mistakes on their property disclosure. Just understanding that just disclose it.
Yeah.
If you even think about it, just disclose it. And then it makes people, it's not what they find out, it's when they find it out.
That's right. Yeah, a week after they moved in, right? So yeah, and I hear about those not very often, but you know, sometimes things just randomly will happen. The water heater will blow. But you know, other things, you know, you're sure you didn't notice any water leaking anywhere, right? You know, so these are the things, and you're trained to look into all of these aspects of a property. And, you know, there's commonalities to all properties, you know, plumbing, electrical, you know, is there asbestos, all of these things. But, you know, but every property is unique and it has a unique history for sure, right? And you don't always know what the history is. As much as you try to figure it out, you can probably take some guesses, but you just don't know. And yeah, people covering up, right? If that's their intent, or claiming innocence or ignorance.
Into houses where people, they have a unique system of heating. So it's an old radiator.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's got probably, like, I'm not kidding, this much asbestos around every single pipe.
Right.
So I'm saying to the buyer, you know, if you don't touch it, it's okay. But
Right.
it's going to come up when you go to sell it again, because the next person may not be so cavalier
Right.
about the fact that there's this much asbestos. Like, it is fire retardant and it's a great product, but it can give you a serious lung problem 20 years down the road. So
right.
You may not care because you're 80.
Right.
The buyer who's 20 does. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about let's talk about a sale, right? So let's look about if a person is considering to put their house on the market, what are some of the steps that they should take to start being successful? I know from my perspective what I think they should be doing, but what are some of the early steps that they should be doing even before they talk to a realtor? And then once they reach out to a realtor, what should they be looking at and doing? Start there.
Well, actually, I think the first thing they should do if they know they're going to sell their house in the long run is talk with a realtor, because then if they have a budget, they can ascertain where to spend the money.
Okay.
So if the money is going to be, let's say they have $10,000 and they're going to be living there for 2 more years, then, you know, by all means, replace the hot water tank, which is $100 or $1,000, because that will need to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe focus on redoing the countertops, because people care about kitchens and baths. Mm-hmm. And maybe focus on paint, because that makes how it appears. People are very distracted by multiple colors in a house right now. That's the trend away. So just helping them. I find I have relationships with people after I've sold who've owned houses for 14 or 15 years. Now that's how long I've been in real estate. And they go, Jane, I'm renovating my bathroom. Should I take out my bathtub and make just a shower? And I'm like, well, let's look at the layout of your house and how many other baths you have and how you're going to use the house, and how, generally, no, it's not a good idea. But the trend right now is for ensuite bathrooms to have only showers.
Okay.
So knowing that, if they're going to sell fairly quickly and they want to enjoy the home right now that way, then go ahead. But yeah, so A, have a relationship with your realtor. B, have a relationship with your mortgage broker, and a broker is different than a mortgage specialist. So a specialist usually works for a bank, and a broker can shop the whole market. And I tend to use brokers because I feel people should have a choice in what they want to purchase, and different lending institutions offer different products and they have different terms and conditions. So why limit yourself?
Right. Yeah. And a mortgage broker, most of what I see coming through is coming through brokers for sure. That's true. They can give you options. They can get you a better rate. If your regular bank is, say, RBC, they will not necessarily give you the best rate just because you've banked with them for 30 years or 20 years, right? It doesn't matter anymore. It all comes down to your credit rating, asset, they do their score, right?
Yeah.
Not all lenders are the same for sure. Like they all lend money, but the paperwork is quite different. Some of the, I distinguish between lenders, I call them cyber lenders. So they wouldn't be your average walk in the bank lender. all the mortgage brokers can sell any of the main banks. So Scotia, or, yeah. Pardon me?
RBC generally only sells in-house.
Right, right.
Okay, RBC. But
Yeah.
I will say though, like one of the things to do if you're working with a broker is if you have a cloud account,
Right.
it's every year put in your T4 slips and your notices of assessment and pay stubs in, like I use Dropbox. So I have every
Right.
year, I have all my income.
Yeah.
And then when I went to buy this year, I'm like, here's a folder. Because that
Right.
is so hard retroactively to find, honestly.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, because they're looking for income, and if you're self-employed, it's even that much more, right? And this year, you know, I understand that they're really scrutinizing whether or not people are working. It was a big concern a couple months ago, and was highlighted in the news where, you know, that's fine. You bought the house and you had a 6-week closing, but you know, 5 days before you were to complete this, you lost your job, not sure if you're ever going to get it again. And so there's been a lot of dialogue in the legal world in and around what does that mean. And I think right now we're, you know, nobody really wanted to upset the financial world too much, but I think going down the road that those will still be considerations in in the process of a cycle. If you're selling, it's not a deal. It matters if you're purchasing.
Well, they'll call, what they do is they call the day of the closing
Yeah.
to ensure you still have your job.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and again, I just say, tell your mortgage broker what's happening.
Right. Right. Yeah.
They have to know to help you.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and this isn't to scare people off. It's just, you know, because but you want to understand if you're going to enter into a purchasing agreement that, and this is even on a mortgage refinance. You can stay in your own home, and I've seen some of the lenders putting people through some pretty significant hoops. I'm like, I've never seen this before. Some of the requirements and additional guarantors, you know. So for somebody who may own a business separately, they're making the business become a guarantor also. But it's like, you know, you started this mortgage 10 years ago, and you're just renewing into another 5-year term, and they're still, so some really, I think it's fair to say to keep yourself abreast of what's going on, and keep communicating, right?
Right.
And that applies to me, because if I found out that a client of mine and they hadn't told the broker, that comes back on me as a legal person, because I represent the lender. So we have a dual agency role when in most conveyances from when we're representing a purchaser. And so we do the whole stream of work to get the transfer from the seller into the purchaser's name. And then we have the whole stream of work that goes from for the mortgage and all the lending, and it, you know, we marry it together for a seamless transaction. But I actually hold some pretty big cards if they came up. Touch wood, they haven't come up yet, but the potential is there, and so we always have to be on our toes and be vigilant about what's going on. So communicating is your best key with anybody that's in. I often, you know, I often think that the realtor is the best first person to talk to, because there's a different, you know, once they tell me I need to do something with it, you can help guide them and calm them down, right? Because a lot of situations can be solved, right? But you just need to, you know, not kind of get too upset about it, and you just need to put your head into it and figure out a solution, in my mind, right?
One other tip I would say is go through the inspection report you had on your house when you purchased it, and just make sure
Okay.
address all the issues, or have a pre-inspection done by a building inspector, just so that you have a checklist of what needs to be done before you sell. So for instance, I went to a beautiful house with a gorgeous suite, and there was knob and tube all over the basement.
Oh,
And I'm
wow.
like,
Yeah.
knob and tube is so 20 years ago.
Probably 100 years ago, actually. Right?
But you have trouble getting insurance on that. So
Yeah, I
that
do.
is a
Yeah.
fact.
Yeah.
And when we were in the house, like on the main level, I'm like, I realized I was looking at the plugs. I said, those plugs are horizontal, not vertical. I'm pretty sure that's knob and tube.
Yeah.
So let's go down to the basement. And I looked for it and I found it.
Yeah. 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 And that's a sign of a good realtor, looking for these things. And if you're the listing agent, the clients may not really want to hear that, but it's information that's going to cause them grief if because I don't think you can have your head in the clouds when you're going to list, right? Maybe you can in certain markets. Maybe today is I understand that there's a lot of call for single family dwellings. Kind of in the $700,000, $800,000 range. There's lots of interest. So, maybe on some things people are going to be interested to go for it, and they're not going to be too, from a seller's perspective, not too worried, but it's a negotiating tactic to drop money, right? Essentially, that's how they look at it, right? I always love those clauses that say, if I find anything over $1,000 wrong with the house. I mean, what house have you ever lived in that doesn't need more than $1,000 worth of work at any given time, right? Yeah, of course we could update the dishwasher or the fridge or whatever, right? Like, yeah.
We call it a whimsy clause.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So what about on a purchase? And what should people be looking at if they're looking to purchase? What sorts of, how can they get? I mean, you mentioned the relationship with the mortgage broker. Absolutely, get started. You can basically lock in some rates for 4 months before, so you've got time. My recommendation is always start early in that process, because get it locked in, and then you know what you're at. I'm seeing mortgage rates right now, 5 years at 2.24%. So that's the lowest I've ever seen. And they're expected to maybe go lower. Why?
Well, you want to also check what the terms and conditions are with that, because if you can't prepay it early, or if you're locked in, you just have to be careful. There was a story about the realtor who had to pay a $30,000 fine because she had to get out of her mortgage early because of COVID-19, and all of her tenants left.
Right.
I mean, right now is the hardest time probably to be a landlord, because of this is the first time ever since I've been in real estate that there's been a bit of a, hesitancy around having a tenant.
Right.
And, I used to always tell my clients, I still do, purchase a house knowing you can afford it without the tenant. Then the money that comes in is just bonus.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Because where is that at now? Because it had been that nobody was allowed to be evicted, but where is that currently? They've just recently changed that, I believe, right?
Yeah, they changed it about, I think it's 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
So now you could evict if the buyer's going to move in. That did cause a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
So what people did just at the beginning of COVID-19 was they closed really fast. If they knew they were closing the next month, they just brought it up really fast, so that we wouldn't have any barriers to being to completing on the transaction.
Mm-hmm.
A, people had jobs, and B, we could get rid of the tenants if the buyer was going to move in.
Yeah.
And now there are some people who have longer closing dates in October.
Right.
And so if it's owner occupied, it's fine. If it's tenant occupied, it's like, oh, I hope that the tenant will be able to leave.
That's right. Yes. Everything has come to pass to be okay, but I do know, I had some deals where there was some very strong concerns around people leaving, right? And I get that. I mean, that's kind of always been there from my perspective. Lots of tenants aren't too happy about having to leave. Fair enough. Nobody likes their home being, upset. But the reality is that, real estate, houses do sell, and that is one of the factors of renting. Ultimately, is that you can't guarantee it's going to be your home for 20 years. if it is, and that's what you want, that's great. But, you know, yeah, that's a whole topic discussion in and of itself, right? So
there's a different mindset between a tenant and a homeowner.
yeah.
So the tenant will just generally doesn't take care of a property as well as a homeowner.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had this was a little slide that I put up there. So the real estate process, you have your view, I have my view, and we have our view, which is always the people, right? About how can I make this, how can I set this up for success, right? And that's a lot of what we're talking about, is depending on what angle, you know, any of our listeners are coming at their real estate from, whether they're a sale or a purchase. There's certain commonalities of preparation, giving yourself time, I think, is a huge aspect. The organization around, you know, if you're selling, you know, organizing, doing a pre-inspection. I'd thought about that years ago. I thought that's a brilliant thing to find out. If you know that there's issues with the house, know about it before somebody uses it to negotiate, right? Yeah. I had a person in, probably about 6 weeks ago, and this was on an estate sale. And I often talk to a lot of people who are in the beginning stages of the probate, you know, putting documents in. And lots of people will ask me as a notary, just, you know, they try and get some common sense, practical insight into what they're dealing with, right? Or look for people to help them. And in this one case, I said, you know, you should really start talking to a realtor early in the process. Because he was thinking they would wait till they got probate. They'd wait, maybe it would be November. And I said, you know, you can sell a property subject to probate being granted. I said, the market's about to get warm, if not hot. And I said, you know, when you talk to the realtor early in that process, you can, as you mentioned earlier, you can start planning for, what do I need to do to clean this up? What are some of the financial considerations around keeping the property for longer? But there's also the aspect that, you know, something's going to be coming on the market, and you'll know how to position it. And essentially you start listening. Your ears are to the ground as soon as you know something's coming up, even if it's in 4 or 6 months, because you might come across the right scenario or person who's interested in that property. So
yeah, and also often, especially for probate, people may need people to help them deal with the stuff in the house.
Yeah.
And we have all the connections. So I mean, why reinvent the wheel when you have somebody who already rides a bike, right?
Right. Rides it fast.
Right.
Really fast, right? Oh, you're so fit.
Seller right now who's going through probate. His cousin died, and he lives up island, and his cousin lived here. And just like, for instance, coincidentally, I was selling something at our house, a still.
Interesting. I'm sure that's another conversation. Zoom and learn.
Anyway, my husband was selling his still, and he said, so-and-so is coming to pick it up. Can you let him know? And I said, sure. And then as I'm there, the guy says, do you know, I really need bottles. And I'm like, well, coincidentally, I was just at a house, and this guy was talking about getting rid of hundreds of bottles.
Right.
Number.
Right.
So, and yesterday, I sold a house and had woodworking equipment, tons and tons. And the seller's this really talented woodworker. And he's 77, and he wants to make sure, 87. He wants to make sure it goes to a really talented person who he can have a relationship with. And he was an engineer, woodworker. So I'm at the park with my dog around the corner here. And this woodworker who became an engineer was talking to me about starting a shop. And I said, well, actually, I know a guy who's selling all of his equipment. So they went together and bought thousands of dollars worth of this guy's stuff that otherwise he probably would have sold, you know, on eBay or whatever.
Yeah.
Facebook Marketplace. So it all went, so we can sort of smooth things over for people.
Right. Yeah. And just the fact that you have you can, I mean, the one, you know, your world is always on the go. You've got your ears open, you're out doing different things, seeing people, talking to other realtors. You have a really good current sense of lots of people actually, right? And one of your attributes is also being a connector, right? Right, and making that connection to people to help them out, right? So yeah, so that's pretty cool. So are there one of the clauses, I just wanted to talk about the contract, right? One of the clauses that I've been seeing in there is the COVID, I call it the COVID clause, right? It came out fairly early on, and it allowed for, say, if somebody was selling a house and they came down with COVID and they couldn't move because they're quarantined or weird stuff, right? What do you think about that kind of a clause?
So it was actually removed.
Yeah.
So we're not allowed to use it anymore.
Okay.
I think also that may be a bit of a whimsy clause too.
Okay.
I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really comment on the clause itself, but basically what we were told is that if we want to renegotiate it, if something happens, we're going to have to renegotiate it.
Yeah.
And you know, I would say I don't know anybody who is affected by COVID and to not complete.
Right. Yeah.
However, I think it would go under extenuating circumstances and be considered a human being.
Yeah. Yeah. I do know some of the title insurance companies have come out with some very early on, they adopted some clauses, and this is one of the values that title insurance now has that is related to if that were a cause of delay or non-performance, they've got some interesting clauses to come out and cover that because you're not acquiring the title. So of interest how that insurance industry has responded to that. So that's interesting.
Title insurance is more of an American animal.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So I can see they're so litigious. I can see that they would come up with that clause because I think probably it makes sense for us in our market. Though we were told we weren't allowed to use it anymore, and I'm not sure the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, interesting, because I saw them drop off, but I hadn't actually heard that. So, but I thought, yeah, well, I think it was the best attempt to deal with an emerging situation, right? And once that sort of stabilized, we had a sense that, well, we can still get out there wearing our personal protective gear, or the masks, the gloves, and see homes and stuff. I think that some of these things have calmed down. You're right. So, so is there any, there's one thing that I was thinking about on a sale and purchase. So if people are looking to do that, it's always been a challenge when people choose the closing day. So that's the day that everything transfers to the other person, the ownership, the monies, and all that. When people are selling a property, and then they're needing the money from that sale to buy the same day, it is challenging. And I had a real pressure cooker, and I literally was down to 2 minutes, right? And that had to do with like there's a whole lot of different, our whole industries have changed. Banking hours were different. You had to go to the bank and wait in line up for an hour and a half. So, and plus a lot of people, I'm finding that the timelines around things, if there's a way to build in a better timeline, one of my beliefs is that people should be using bridge loans. So if you've sold your house and then you found the right house, but the dates don't align, take a bridge loan for 3 days or 3 weeks, right? Because it really isn't that expensive. It's a little more paperwork, but it's not that more expensive. And it can really ease the burdens of timelines. Because there are already pressure cookers in the pre-COVID world. There are more pressure cookers now because you know, we're waiting. There's so many different touch points that we have. I've looked at it, and we have at least 80 different touch points in one file, right? Back and forth, asking for things, getting it in, documenting, paying out. And 80 is probably a conservative number, quite frankly. Like, it's, you really have to have those processes and systems in place to make sure. But these extenuating circumstances of trying to get in to do our regular business in a non-regular world have caused us some grief, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So what you can do is you can have the completion one day and the possession the next day or a few days later. We did do that with a few of our transactions. So one guy actually completed 3 weeks before he got possession, and that was because of his job.
Yeah.
We do, generally, we try not to close on a Friday, although that's hard at the end of the summer, I'm finding.
Right.
So
Yeah.
try and close midweek so that if there is a problem, because in my past, I have had, especially if you're working with a bank that's on the East Coast, they're 3 hours behind.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's another reason why to work with a broker as opposed to a bank, because the bank's like, whatever. They don't care as much. And I'm probably generalizing, and I'm going to get in trouble for that. But
I would say there's certainly some banks where that is true, for sure. Yeah.
But, oh, don't worry, we'll get to it on Monday. I'm like, well, I need a house for my client for the next 3 days, please.
That's right. Yeah. So one of my practices that I've always done, and it comes from the belief that I want to, and the desire to set it up for success, because when I first started practicing, I saw that everybody did everything at the last minute. And I'm not talking about the realtors, I'm talking about the financing, the insurance, even the clients getting their own money to close a deal. And so what I did was I said, we will sign the document. So as soon as we have a conveyance file come in, we set the appointment, and it's a week before at the latest, if not 10, and we've even bumped that to 10 to 14 days before. And what I found that I started this about almost 5 years ago, because I was like, I can't cope with this, because you have this, you know, incredible crescendo of work and all these touch points and all these things that need to be done. I said, these are the times you're going to have problems, right? Yeah. So I put everything in advance, because I thought, you know what, clients are moving, you know, they're trying to still work and deal with kids. And then they've got to sign this, and they've got to buy insurance, or they've got to, you know, move, whatever they've got to do. And I found that combined with the knowledge that there's, you know, probably 1 in 15 files, something kind of goes sideways. I've never had anything permanently go sideways. So touch wood again. But, and part of that is because we do things in advance. We give the time, we give the buffer, so that if we don't have the mortgage instructions, we've got some days to work with it. But if we didn't do that, then we would be getting mortgage instructions the day before if we went to everybody else's. So they work to our rule. And our rule is, we're signing this date, you need to provide us with this. You know, we educate our clients to, like, get your mortgage document signed, because there's so much that we can't do until we get that in place. And
do you have trouble with the other, because you need a statement of adjustments from the other notary or lawyer
on a sale? But we say, our clients are signing this day, you have to send it to us. So they do. And sometimes it's an hour or two before, but at least we get it. But we've already built in a week, and we tell people, the client saying, look, we just got this, but you know what, we can do this tomorrow or the next day, what works best for you. And so I always carve in time and allow for that, because I know that will happen. And honestly, I think most of the people really appreciate that, because they don't realize that everybody's like, they're working to the timeline, and it's just not the best way to work. And it allows us to do our job well, to do it with pride, you know, and accuracy. And, you know, even if they're like, even if there was an error or something missed, we have time to deal with it. There are some documents that need to absolutely be signed with me. And those key documents can often be signed. Other things, if there's an adjustment to like a statement of adjustments, we can do that once they've signed once, we can do that afterwards and just get them to confirm by an email that they approve that, right? And so we always build in the buffers to allow for that success. Because I never really want to see people twice. But we had, I signed, well, no, do you know what I mean, right? Like, I'm happy to see them when they come pick up their check on a sale, right? But I don't want to see them twice to have to do more work, right?
Are you doing direct deposits now?
Right?
You do direct deposits?
I used to, but because of the banking, you know, the restrictions in the times and the staffing, and to keep us, you know, in our bubble, I've reduced that. If it's my main bank, like TD, I always will. But for some clients, we're just couriering to the bank, and they've given us the information, and that seems to be working in some cases. If I'm doing a direct deposit to RBC, that will never work because RBC is very challenging to work with. Just saying, right? Their mortgages are easy and great, right? When we're doing them, but if we're trying to deposit sale funds for a client, I have to go and get a bank draft. I have to do it personally. I don't have the time in my day to go spend at a bank getting a bank draft to then turn around. So
it's funny how those little things throw a bit of a wrench in the works. And I just want to say, like, our system's unique, the Torrent system, in that we can plan ahead.
Yeah. So
we definitely should be planning ahead, right?
Yeah, always, right? So, so anyhow, is there? I'm just trying to think where we did that. I'm just going to open this up to see if there's anybody who has any questions that they want to ask Jane specifically. So I'll just leave this open for a minute or so.
Barbara, are you up?
So can I unremote or unmute?
I just unmuted myself. Yeah, I'm here. Hi. I'm just here out of curiosity, actually. Yeah, I was sort of looking to see what's happening in Victoria.
With the market?
With the market, yeah.
So,
Coast, yeah.
Okay. I actually
interested in buying or selling, or is that kind of?
Well, I'm not selling. I own my condo in Fairfield at the moment, but I am looking on possibly borrowing on the equity to purchase other real estate. Yeah.
Well, we just did that in February, just before COVID, because I had a gut feeling that the market was going to go gangbusters this year. It just felt like it.
That felt like it to me too.
Yeah. So we did that. You know, it depends on your comfort level. I'm very comfortable investing in real estate, especially like if it depends on what you're going to invest in. But overall, our market, I can sort of give you a little quick update if you want.
Great.
Okay, so this month, June 2020, so 399 single family homes sold. That's 86.4% more than in May. Yeah. And it's 14.7% more than last year. So that's why I was saying when I looked, like it bounced, it went from like 6 to a 2 to an 8, I would say. Average house price did go up, but the median house price was $865. The median house price in May was $875, and the median house price in Greater Victoria last year was $867. So overall, we're actually looking pretty flat. Like if you were to look back, condos, 209 units sold. The average house price was $480. Median was $425. So that's 9% over last month and 1.2% over last year. So median last year in condos was 420. And then townhouses, the average house price was 593 in June, with the median of 564, and it was 572 in May and 601. So condos and townhouses actually have taken a bit of a hit over the past year, and part of that is because of the insurance issues.
Right.
There's been a bit of a questioning of whether or not people can finance stratas.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually it was interesting because in the middle of COVID, I got a very snarky letter from a manager saying, well, I never supply the insurance. I said, well, you better start, because there's a real question of whether or not a buyer can get financing for a strata if they can't get insurance for the building. They won't fund it.
Mm-hmm.
So I could share my screen if you want, but list to sale ratios, we've done really well. So we had okay, so I'll share my screen.
Yeah, on that issue of the strata insurance, we're recently advised to make sure that we're providing that detail to all of our clients. Can't say that we didn't tell them, because the buck still ends with us, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're advised and explain.
This shows what a normal market is like. So we generally have like over in a hot market, it was kind of one big hump. In a normal market, it's kind of two big humps. So you have your spring and your fall market, and we usually peak in May. And so what happened was, as we were starting to do gangbusters, and you can see year over year, we were doing very good in March. And because of the low inventory, so February was higher compared to last year. And then March, the inventory went right down compared to normal. And the sales were the same. So the list to sale ratio was really good. And then in April, everything just kind of went down. So we really are now in a late spring market. In like our July is our normal May right now. That's what it feels like. It's very, very fast. And then this is a great graph to look at. So it shows sales to listing ratio. So when it's about 20%, this is a balanced market. When it's a little higher, it's a seller's market. We went right down into a buyer's market in April, and then we are bouncing back up into a balanced to seller's market. So, and then I love, what are you interested in, condo or house or townhouse? Barbara?
Oh, yeah, I own a condo. Oh, in terms of buying, I'm looking, it depends. I'm looking on possibly investing with on other people.
Okay.
In a real estate property, whether it's a rental, it wouldn't be a house, likely some other unit. But anyway, I'm just, yeah, looking for cash to invest in the right property.
Okay, so if you look here, one quick way to do an analysis is when you're purchasing a property is to sort of see where, maybe I can zoom in a bit. So this is the area. This comes out every month, and it shows you where the sales are happening. So the most popular area, the biggest area geographically as well, is Saanich East. Mm-hmm. And you can see, so this is single family homes. So 950 to 999 year to date is where we are, with 5 sales in the current month. That's in June. So this shows me where the activity is happening in this particular area. And if I were to go to Esquimalt is kind of one of my hidden gems that I love. So you can see that they have a lower price range. But I think if you go to a place like Toronto or Montreal, you can see that almost always historically, properties have developed over time at a higher rate when they're closer to the core than they have in the burbs. And so this may be changing because of COVID, because I think more people are moving to rural properties. But in general, because there's going to be pressure on people to be more efficient in how they live, less consumption of things like gas, and more sustainable housing. To me, this area is under $1 million and close to downtown. It's underpriced compared to the rest of Victoria. So you can see Langford here. Here is very popular, and we have a lot of, I'm pointing with my finger.
It's okay.
But we have a lot of people buying in this range here, which is 650 and up to 900. Whereas in Saanich East, that is 800 up to 1.1. So the ranges are different. So this is handy when you're thinking of investing. Just think, okay, you know what? If I buy a house, if I could buy a house in Oak Bay down here, 650, that house is going to go up in value. That's just logic. And same thing with condos. So you can look at this information and see, okay, in Saanich East, if I can buy a condo in the lower price range here, and depending on its fit and finish, and you have to look at what's sold in the building over time, but you know, likely it's going to go up if you're going to buy in the 250 range. So just
Right. And I guess you want to consider whether or not you've got a fixer-upper or you want it ready to go, right? Those are very different ideas around that. So
yeah, I mean, I have clients who, in a normal market, you know, you can buy a crappy condo in November, and then spend 3 months flipping it and sell it during a high market in April.
I know the one client where I had acted as the power of attorney, and the condo, we could have sold it for 400 in October, November, but in the following May we got 495, right? So, and nothing had really changed dramatically to that place other than the time. I've always believed that late fall is a really good time to look at seeing what's on the market, because those people may have to move, and there's not a lot of buyers around at that same time, right? So there's, and it's the best time to check out for water damage when you're in the wetter seasons too, right? If you're looking, I heard that from an inspector once, right?
Yeah, so, we've always bought late in the year.
Yeah. So anyhow, well, that's great. Thank you so much, Jane. I really appreciate you attending the Zoom and Learn, and thank you, Barbara, for your questions. And you know, if I guess you're on. If you do you give up the host, or do I take it?
Yes. Let me.
Problem. This is all new for me. I'm doing well, so thanks for helping me out here.
No problem. Hold on. Let me just get out of here. I can end it for you if you want.
Yeah, you could. Well, Jane Johnston, you're very easy to find. You're a top realtor with REMAX Camosun. I can personally attest to the value you have, the qualities that you have. You're on top of the market. That was one of the things I was super impressed with. You know, we'd go and look at the property, and you'd whip out your laptop, and you know, you were up to date. You had it all there, and it made it a much easier process, certainly, because I need people who are on the ball and who know things and can answer right away, or have the resources to get to it quickly. So I appreciated that. So so for any of the listeners, if you want to touch base with Jane, then REMAX Camosun, top realtor, Jane Johnston. Thanks so much. So I'm going to say goodbye to all.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks.
Bye.